The loss of a loved one can leave you feeling depressed, angry, alone, lost. But you don't have to face this journey on your own. Open to Hope is a free community for anyone who has experienced loss. Find support. Find help. Find hope. Give grief a voice at Open to Hope. For more information, find us at opentohope.com.
Welcome to the Open to Hope show in conjunction with the Compassionate Friends. I'm your host, Dr. Gloria Horsley, with my co-host and daughter,
Dr. Heidi Horsley.
Well, Heidi, we've got an important show today, and I know one that is dear to your heart because it's going to be on sibling loss. And you always say that siblings are the unrecognized mourners, right?
Absolutely. I think we're unacknowledged, and I think our loss is very minimized. And I'm excited to have two people that I love in this field that are here today and that talk about sibling loss and that bring it to the awareness of the public. So let me introduce them.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to be talking today with two of my friends, Elizabeth Devita-Raeburn and Molly Gandour. And Elizabeth's brother Ted died of an immune disorder, and she is the author of The Empty Room, Losing a Brother or Sister at Any Age. Elizabeth interviewed 77 bereaved siblings, I'm one of them in the book, and told our stories. And I think that this is the best book out there, bar none, about sibling loss. I would recommend anyone that has had a sibling die or that wants to know more about sibling loss to get this book.
Okay.
It's excellent. And then our second guest is Molly Gandour, and Molly has done a fabulous documentary. She's a documentary filmmaker and producer of the Academy Award-nominated documentary Gasland.
Mm-hmm.
And she also has a new documentary, which is called The Peanut Gallery, based on the death of her 14-year-old sister, Aimee, to leukemia. And I first met Molly at my class at Columbia University because we were doing a sibling loss panel, and Elizabeth got Molly to come, and Elizabeth and Molly both came to my class and talked to my grad students about sibling loss. And I really love Molly's documentary because, Mom, you feel like you're a fly on the wall,
Mm-hmm.
and you've seen it kind of looking in on a family that's trying to deal with the death of their daughter and the death of Molly's sister, and it's very realistic.
Yeah, great.
So,
Well,
yeah.
I'm looking forward to both of them.
Yeah.
Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us.
It's great to have you both on. Well, Elizabeth, why don't we start with you and have you tell us a little bit about your story?
My story, wow. I was born.
Yeah, right, exactly.
So had an older brother named Ted. He was 3 years older. And when I was 6 and he was 9, he started showing up with huge bruises all over his legs. And my father is an oncologist and recognized immediately that there was a blood disorder and brought him in and had him tested. And it turned out to be something called aplastic anemia, which is a rare immune disorder.
And your dad's a doctor,
My
right?
dad's a doctor, yeah.
Wow. So he knew, as I remember from reading the book, we were sitting at the table. And,
Yeah, he looked down and he knew because he
and
saw
he knew.
kids with leukemia all the time who had similar types of bruises. So he knew that it was either leukemia or aplastic anemia the minute he looked at my brother's legs. And aplastic anemia was unfortunately by far the worst disease at that point because leukemia was starting to be curable at that point. Aplastic anemia was an extremely rare disease. So his immune system completely failed, and the only thing for it was to put him in a laminar airflow room, which is a sterile room, and hope that his immune system restarted.
And he never came home. I
No.
mean, talk about shocking
Yeah.
and loss.
And you know, there was a movie years ago called The Boy in the Bubble, and wasn't his life based loosely on that movie?
On my brother's story and the story of a boy in Texas who was known in the press as Baby David.
I mean, I can't imagine, like my mom said, your brother being whisked to the hospital to this bubble room and spending the rest of his life there, and what that must have been like for you.
Yeah, I mean, in the family it was sort of explained or talked about in terms of a while. It would be a while. You know, as an adult, I learned that they expected that his immune system would either reboot, which happened in some cases in this disease, or that he would die within a year. And neither one happened. And so he ended up living in there for 8.5 years before he died.
You were 6 at the time, and he was 10, right?
9, almost 10,
Okay. And then he died at 18,
17 and a half.
17 and a half.
Didn't you end up working at the hospital or something, or volunteering and getting to know the staff? And
Well, yeah, because I grew up there. I mean, I
Right.
went to the hospital every day after school and on weekends, and so you could still drop me in that hospital blindfolded. I could find my way to the cafeteria. I just knew the place, and I knew the doctors, and so I ended up working in labs and volunteering through college, I think.
and how long has it been since Ted died?
Oh gosh, he died in 1980, so
Okay.
many, many years at this point.
And what's happened to you over the years with the experience? Has it constantly changed for you?
Oh yeah, I think just when you think I've sort of got this in place, something new happens in your life that can bring the loss fresh, or change it, or give you a window on it that you never knew you were going to experience before. You know, having children and realizing that they'll never know their uncle. That kind of thing.
They won't know him, but in a way they will know him because you tell them the stories of him and
I
who
do.
he
They
was?
know all about him. And there are other ways, you know, the ways that I parent or that my parenting is either, you know, affected strongly or negatively by this experience that I, you know, bring to that.
My son right now is the same age my brother was when he died.
I just got to chill. I know exactly
And
what you
Which
mean.
is?
He's 17, and he'll be 18 in 3 months. My brother died 3 months before his 18th birthday. So it's a very strange thing for me because it brings up a lot. And I also think for me, I'm a more overprotective parent probably than I would have been had I never had a sibling loss.
Yeah, I definitely am.
Well, let's stop in a minute and talk to you a little bit about your documentary film and what you've done. And then I want to all talk together about some of the topics, because I'm sure when you hear these two talking, a lot of things are coming up in your head about your sister's death and how. Okay,
Yeah,
so-
well, part of the reason I made the film was in my mid-20s, I was feeling really disconnected from my life. My sister died when I was 10, and she was 14, and I actually read Elizabeth's book and was doing some other stuff around that time, kind of trying to figure out how I could approach this issue, because I was starting to realize, I guess for the first time, how much it had affected me. And that set me on a path that I felt like I needed to talk to my parents, because they had all the information. Since I was a kid when it happened, I didn't really have the story. I couldn't really piece together the story. So that's what led me to want to go back and speak with them. And yeah, and since I'm a filmmaker, somehow filming it seemed like a way to open up the topic.
And I love
and
the
it
way you
did.
filmed it. Because it does feel like I'm kind of a fly on the wall looking in at this family. Should I even be here? You know, and they're all sitting around the table and you guys are having all these conversations in the car, and it's so real. I mean, it is what happens after a sibling dies. And I love at one point your father says, I can't do this 24 hours a day. I can't keep doing this.
Yeah, I made a point when I went home that I wanted to prioritize the experience of being there over the filmmaking, over the logistics of filmmaking. So a lot of the shots are kind of set on a tripod, or, you know, just the cameras just sit. I mean, we didn't have anybody else there shooting. It was just us. And I think that comes through in the film, that we did we were filming all the time, and we did kind of forget that the camera was there. And I think that lends a
before we
certain
show
quality.
Reality TV.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Before we show the clip, just give us a little background on your mom and dad. Your mom's a psychologist.
My mom's a psychologist. My dad is a professor of linguistics at Purdue University. I grew up in where my parents still live, also in a kind of Big Ten college town in Indiana, and yeah.
And your sister, I know, was very creative and did a lot of drawing and actually made things for people at the hospital and all that kind of thing. And your parents, I don't know if this film clip shows it, but I would recommend for everybody to see the entire film. And you can get that where?
It'll be online and in DVD sometime this year.
Okay.
It's not publicly available yet, but it will be soon.
Yeah, one of the things that intrigued me when I was watching it was the number of things that they saved from your sister, all the drawings and all the kinds of, it was amazing the number of the barrels almost of things that they had. So you had a lot to go with and deal with and go through with this whole thing. So, because your parents didn't talk about it, right?
No, we did not talk about it. And yeah, I found a treasure trove really of stuff for my sister. My sister would make beaded necklaces and sell them at the hospital to the nurses. People would buy them.
I'm feeling some overlap here because Ted was a big presence at the hospital.
Yeah.
And
No,
he
I'm
did a lot of
hearing
stuff
it
with
all,
the
yeah.
staff. And so as I'm hearing
He
this, I'm
also
going, wait a
played the
minute.
guitar, didn't he?
Yeah, as I'm hearing about your sister, I'm going, wow, Ted was, had that kind of personality also.
Yeah. Yeah. So, well, let's watch this clip and then let's continue on with this discussion. And the clip, do you want to say anything about the clip, how it's set up?
I'm actually not sure what clip it is, so I don't want to. Yeah.
I think they're sitting at the table, talking, and you're eating, and anyway.
It's your
Okay.
trailer. Yeah.
Oh, the
It's your
trailer.
trailer.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's self-explanatory.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's take a look at that, and then we will.
Dad's grief is very buried under work.
Grief about what?
I didn't realize until my mid-20s that I was missing certain memories. All the good memories were faded, hazy. My most vivid memory was of her death itself. I asked my parents if, for the first time, we could talk and attend family therapy.
You don't want to talk about it anymore.
I prefer not to.
Do you know why?
I just prefer to eat and talk about something else. I can't do therapy all day long. I'm just incapable.
How are you doing with him today with it and all that?
Much better. Yeah, I mean, we're able to talk about it, and talk, as you say, it changes, and so we're able to keep up with how it's changing, which is a huge gift.
So did it help you heal doing this documentary?
Definitely. Yeah, I don't know how I could, for me, this was, I don't know how else I could have kind of processed what happened.
And did you learn anything about yourself during the process of, making the film?
Yeah, I mean, the most painful thing I learned was having to edit footage of myself at home with my parents. I learned that I can be a surly teenager when I'm at home. So that was difficult.
And it sounds like your role in the family was to be the sunshine, the ray of light, the person that distracted them from tough times.
Definitely.
And was that your role also after your sister died?
Definitely.
Just
And
so typical for the surviving siblings. Yeah.
Now, you both have any other siblings?
Me, no.
Okay, so so you were the one who was there for both of you. We've talked a lot, Elizabeth, about your brother being in the hospital, and because that's so dramatic and the whole thing. How was it after he died for your family?
It was horrific because for 8.5 years, our entire lives had, revolved around the hospital and this whole routine of going to the hospital and his illness, and it had become this sort of like, this is the new reality. It would just go on, and then suddenly it was gone. And so we had to go home and play normal, whatever that was.
That's a huge adjustment.
Yeah, it was big. And none of us really knew we were doing it. We were just suddenly back in our house, not going to the hospital every day.
Well, I'm thinking of you're at the hospital, and the same here with Molly, but you've got all the support at the hospital. So it's you and all the staff and the nurses and all these other things, and then you go home and it's just you and your parents, your
Yeah.
grieving parents,
Yeah.
which had to be really hard.
And your sister was in the hospital too, having chemo, right?
Yeah, and especially for the last 2 years of her life, it was in the hospital. That's really playing normal. That's
Yeah.
an interesting way of putting it.
How long was she sick?
She was sick for 8 years, on and off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Similar. Yeah.
So how do you two think that impacts you, having somebody in your family sick for that long and trying to grow up?
I don't think there's a part of me that's not about that. I mean, I run into it constantly. It's just shaped everything about me.
And do you worry at all about your own kids
Oh yeah.
getting sick?
Oh yeah. If I see bruises on my kids' legs, I have that 15 or 20 seconds of talking myself off the ledge to the normal place where you're supposed to, approach that. Yeah.
And the same question for Molly. I know you don't have kids, but does it impact you today? Like, are you different because you lost your sister, and does it impact the way you look at the world?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, I think when I was growing up, I just felt like her problems were much bigger than, I felt like my problems were nothing compared to hers, because hers were life or death. So that's always a struggle for me to, be able to deal with my, take my life seriously. But yeah, it's also deeply impacted, I think, how I see relationships, because I know how fragile it can be, and how people can be there and gone. And
Well, and I love that you did the film and Elizabeth did the book, because like you said, it was hard to even think that your problems were even big enough to be acknowledged, and here you are, a bereaved sibling, and what is our major issue? We don't feel we have the right to our own grief,
Our own
because our
story.
parents' grief
Yeah.
is so big.
Well, and it's what's acknowledged by society.
Well, that's it.
Yeah.
Yes, society minimizes our grief and says, oh, it's just a sibling death.
Yeah.
Or take care of your parents.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then people want to know why we're not speaking to our parents about the loss. It's because we're trying to be good kids,
Yeah.
taking care of our parents and not causing them any more pain.
Yeah.
yeah, my parents were actually shocked, I think, by a lot of the stuff that I brought to them during the filming process. They say that they really had no idea of what I was going through.
Mine too. Yeah.
Yeah, my mom even told me that she took because I had trouble talking about it when I was younger, I didn't feel like I could bring these issues to them, and she even told me that she took that as almost a kind of coldness on my part, or that I wasn't thinking about it at all, because I wasn't talking about it. And so I think she was also kind of relieved,
That it did impact you. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting too, because your mother's a psychologist, right? So do you think that now, does she have any feelings that she dropped the ball at all, or she didn't get it, or?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's been something she's had to kind of struggle with. But I think I also, through talking to my parents, also gained so much empathy for their point of view and everything that they're doing. When I went home and started filming, I was so angry at them, and over the course of years of working on this film, I've in becoming more of an adult myself, I can imagine being an adult in that situation and what that's like, and everything that was on her plate,
So it helped you to empathize more with your parents doing the film.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And what did you learn from your book, Elizabeth? I know you wrote it a while ago, but what did you learn about sibling loss?
Well, the first thing I learned was that I thought when I started the book that I had sort of dealt with my brother's death, whatever that means, and it was, it could have been further from the truth. Like, I really had to go through the ringer in hearing those stories and to find my own story and my own loss, and that only in writing that story and understanding it could I fully grieve. So there was that. I did learn that, that losing a sibling, the way that people tell their stories, is an identity crisis that we have to resolve, that most of us feel like we need to carry them forward in some way, that's just what feels right, not to leave them behind in our lives, but to bring them forward, which I think, in a way, telling the stories is doing that too.
Well, what's interesting about that statement is that they've done a research study recently that shows that the continuing bond between a sibling after loss is far greater and bigger than the bond between a parent and a child, the continuing bond.
Oh,
that
interesting.
we, like you said, feel the need to bring them forward because they, like you always say, they were parallel travelers
Right.
in our lives together.
Right.
They were walking with us on this journey, so we feel the need to keep bringing them on that journey.
Yeah.
Which I thought was interesting, because I thought they'd say the parent continuing bond was stronger, but they said the sibling was in this study.
I wonder, do you guys have any survival guilt? Heidi talks about that every so often.
I've always wrestled with that because it doesn't totally resonate for me. I mean, at the time, I felt like the better child died, the smarter one, or the the more worthy one, and the more important one. So it's more like I felt like I just wasn't as good, but it wasn't exactly guilt. So I don't know. I wrestle with the survivor guilt thing.
Okay, because I felt the same way, and for some reason I feel like I feel like it's guilt. Maybe it's just wording. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I felt like the better one died too.
Yeah.
Because my brother was the athlete, and everybody loved him, and he was the only boy, and he had such a big role in our family before he died.
Yeah.
We were the girls kind of surrounding him. So I felt the same way.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, the wrong child died, basically.
But is that guilt?
I don't know. Well, that's a good question.
Yeah.
What about you, Molly?
Same exact. Yeah, I would say the same exact thing. But yeah, I don't know if I'd experience it as guilt, but more like feeling something not good enough towards my parents, or feeling sorry for them that they got me left, something like that.
Well, and it's interesting because after our brothers and sisters die, they take up they're still such a big presence. They're almost even a bigger presence.
Right.
So on some level, I always thought, wow, I wonder if I had died, if my family would be so destroyed, because, and they would have, I'm sure, but you have this idea that maybe they wouldn't have. Maybe it would have been easier if it was a different child. In hindsight, I don't think my mom would say no, it would be hard regardless, because you've said that before.
Right.
I need to hear it again.
Okay, Heidi. I want to tell you that yes, I would feel just as bad if anything happened to you. But you guys have got Heidi's got a couple of sisters that she can put some stuff on, and you guys are, you're kind of it there, and that's a big responsibility, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of, again, continuing the issue of guilt, what I felt, I think, was a lot of pressure to have a worthy life, because my brother would have done something important or brilliant or whatever, and here, I had to do something big or important. That was like this pressure, like if I was left here, I had to make it worth it,
You'd live your life kind of for both of you.
Yeah. No.
Yeah. And Molly, what about you?
Yeah, I'd say the same thing. I think I'm kind of just starting to realize those aspects of, how I'm approaching my life.
Well, and I've heard other people, and this might not be the case for you, Molly, but I've heard other people that are now the surviving child, because you guys really aren't only children, but you're the only surviving child.
Right.
So I've heard them say that there's pressure to have children. And I don't know, did you, either one of you feel that way?
Yeah.
I felt it because my mother was just like, all her friends' kids had kids, and it was that kind of pressure. I didn't think it was particularly tied to, because my brother died, we had to sort of fill that gap, and I certainly didn't feel like I had to have kids for that reason. I don't know, in terms of being, I guess maybe it's because I've interviewed so many siblings, but to me it seems as complicated to have surviving siblings as to not have any siblings.
Okay.
Because you've got to deal with everybody's different relationship with the person who died, and your relationships with one another, and maybe you're in adolescence and you don't always get along perfectly. I mean, that's a pretty tough road to navigate.
Well, I didn't talk
well.
to my sisters about it very much.
Yeah,
You would think we would lean on each other
Yeah.
initially, but we really didn't.
yeah,
And I think it's because, like you said, we were all very different, and also it's painful.
yeah,
When you're grieving, when you're with somebody that's going through it, it's almost like sometimes you don't even want to go there. It can
Yeah.
be even more painful
yeah,
than maybe someone that was kind of removed from it a little bit.
yeah, definitely.
Well, Elizabeth, you've gone on to now write what I think is a landmark book with your dad,
Thanks.
and I want to congratulate you on that. Tell
Thank
us
you.
what the name of it is.
It's called The Death of Cancer.
The Death of Cancer. Your dad's a cancer specialist.
He's a cancer specialist, and he created the first chemotherapy regimen to cure an adult cancer, and that's really what sparked the use of chemotherapy in cancer treatment.
Wow.
and he grew up with the field. And, you know, his work led to some of the passage of the war on cancer, and so he kind of grew up through that and became director of the NCI and, you know, led the effort. And so this is sort of his memoir and his belief about, you know, where we've been and where we can go, and his belief that this is a winnable war. So.
Oh, that must make you feel good as wanting to do something special
Yeah.
and that kind of thing. And Molly, your wonderful documentary that you've made.
And she went to Sundance with it, or
Slamdance, yeah, yeah.
Slamdance
Yeah.
at the Sundance Film Festival, right?
Right.
So, and that was a big deal because I mean I know thousands of people tried to get into Slamdance, and your documentary got into it.
Yeah, it's a big deal. It's exciting to share it with a room full of strangers and get all kinds of responses.
And were they all crying?
Yeah, they do.
We're going to close the show, Heidi, and I want you as a sibling to come up with the end of it, what you want to say, what you want them to say.
Okay. I guess just advice, just something you want to leave everybody out there about sibling loss. However you guys want to, whatever you want to say about it.
Wow, I think the most powerful thing that I hear from other people is, you know, to find your story and tell your story, to own it, and that begins the process of acknowledging your own loss and being able to grieve what often hasn't been grieved. So.
Yeah, I would echo that. Just find a way to talk about it and just understand that through talking about it, it'll change and you'll get somewhere. Almost just going through that process, that your grief will start to change on its own if you sit with it.
Yeah. Okay.
And I want to put in a pitch for Compassionate Friends here, Heidi. Why don't you talk a little bit about what there is at Compassionate Friends for people?
Okay, well, I'm on the board of directors for the Compassionate Friends, which is an organization for people that have siblings or children that have died. And we have a big conference every year, a national conference, and have a big sibling component of that. So people can get involved. It's in Arizona this year in July. And if there's siblings out there that want to find people that have been where they've been, come and join us.
Yeah. And also there's a Sounds of Sibling Facebook page.
Yes.
And please also visit us at Open to Hope. And thank you both for being on the show today. And
Thank you.
thank you, Heidi, for all that you do for the siblings. And God bless.